So I've now done Dr. Joe's guided meditations for over 6 months, and today I want to run through kind of what my results have been by religiously doing these meditations every single day. Have I been able to rewire and reprogram the neural connections in my brain to be more in line with who I want to be, not who I am by default? And have I been able to manifest a new reality and a new destiny like Dr. Joe claims that you can do by doing this work? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, before I kind of get into where I'm at right now after 6 months of doing this work, it's really relevant to the story to talk about where I started at and what kind of state of mind and life situation I was in that drove me to do the 6 months worth of work. And a big element to this entire story is the fact that I have a 6-year-old son with very severe intellectual disabilities and autism. He has a genetic disorder known as Fragile X. And so he's still not potty trained, he's still nonverbal, and has a lot of these behaviors associated with autism of self-harming and obsessive behaviors and overstimulation and sensory stimulation. And for me personally, this does stir up a lot of emotions, right? It's very stressful, obviously, having a child like that. I'm often sleep deprived because he does wake up in the middle of the night very often. It does give me a lot of anxiety when I go out in public places. I was with him in the grocery store the other day, sort of screaming at the top of his lungs in the middle of the grocery store. And now for the most part, like, I'm over having really bad anxiety about going out in public with my son. I'm mostly over that. But sometimes you just want to go to the grocery store and not stand out, right? Sometimes you don't want everybody staring at you. So it does produce a lot of like social anxiety, and also produces a lot of fear as well. You know, a couple of months ago, he got out of the house. I left the door unlocked. I took my eyes off him for 5 minutes. He got out of the house, and I found him down the street, you know, a quarter mile down the street, walking around barefoot on the road, which is absolutely terrifying. And I constantly have this fear of him, you know, getting loose and getting injured as well. So there's a lot of emotion tied up to my son, which is a big part of this story. Now, my wife also had a lot of challenges with the emotions associated with raising a child with disabilities as well. March of last year, she ended up divorcing me after 9 years of marriage. And the divorce rate is much higher amongst those with children with disabilities just because of the increased stress. Now, the first part of 2021 is really where this whole story starts and how Dr. Joe comes in. So at the beginning of 2020, my wife divorced me. Obviously, the last year or so of our marriage was very stressful and not very pleasant as well. A lot of fighting, a lot of negativity during that last year before we finally decided to move forward with the divorce. I was putting on a lot of weight during the last year, actually the last couple years. I was drinking a lot of alcohol, you know, the last year or so of our marriage as well to kind of handle the stress. And obviously, after the divorce, you know, that was really hard on me as well. I was drinking a lot of alcohol a few months after that as well. Pretty much every single day, probably 6 days out of the week, I was drinking alcohol. I wasn't really taking care of myself. I was eating a lot of unhealthy foods during this whole time period as well. Now, I'm self-employed. I run my own business, and that business completely collapsed after my wife left me. And it's, looking back, it's not surprising, right? I was only able to be as successful as I was in my business because I had my wife there helping me out, supporting me, helping me out with our son. After I had to, you know, I got 50% of custody of my son, and so now I've got to take him to therapy appointments and wake up with him every night and handle him nonstop for 3-4 days out of the week. That entire time, I can barely do any work at all in my businesses. So my entire businesses collapsed during this time period. I also had a lot of financial stress as well. I had to pay my ex-wife $150,000 in the divorce settlement. We only had $75,000 in cash to give her. She got the cash, I got the house with the equity in it, and I had to come up with an additional $75,000 in cash to give her, which I didn't have. Somehow I got screwed over with the taxes as well. We didn't do our taxes at the time of the divorce, and in that divorce settlement, though, it said that we had done our taxes and that Malcolm is responsible for any taxes, and I kind of overlooked that. And so at this time, I owed the IRS $45,000 in taxes as well, which I didn't have because any money I had saved to go towards that went to my ex-wife and the divorce settlement. So I had a tremendous amount of stress on me the first quarter of 2021, right? Because of my son, because of the divorce, because my business is collapsing, because of these financial stress, because I was turning into an alcoholic, because I was unhealthy, had a terrible diet and not exercising. On top of that, I tried to start getting back into dating, which obviously was very awkward. I haven't dated anybody in probably over that, 12 years, and trying to get back into that, but in this really negative mindset. It didn't go very well. I did notice that quite a few women I talk to, I tell them, when I get to that point in the conversation, that I tell them, yeah, by the way, I've got a son with very severe intellectual disabilities. That would be the end of the conversation, right? And so that started really messing with my head as well. I started telling myself, like, God, I'm undateable. I'm never going to be able to find anybody who wants to date somebody, with a child with disabilities. And so this was a really low point in my life. And I remember thinking, like, it couldn't get much worse. But it did. Of course it can. It can always get a lot worse. So at some point during this whole process, I went to the doctor and I started taking an antidepressant. I've never taken an antidepressant before. I don't really know all the rules that go along with them, but they're actually incredibly dangerous if you're not careful with them, and I wasn't aware of this. So I was on an antidepressant for a few months, and then at some point I was thinking, you know what, I'm gonna make some changes in my life. I'm going to start getting back in shape, getting healthy, and I started buying all these stupid nootropics online, right? These different vitamins and minerals. I was taking Alpha Brain, which is the stuff that Joe Rogan preaches. I was taking some workout supplements, some daily vitamins, and I started taking 5-HTP, which is supposed to be a mood elevator and an appetite suppressant, so I was thinking maybe I won't eat as much. And what I didn't realize was that when you're on an antidepressant, you're really not supposed to mix it with other supplements. And some combination of all these supplements, I think the 5-HTP is really what screwed me up, had a terrible reaction with the antidepressant that I was on. And it had this weird accumulative effect where every day my mental state just got worse and worse and worse, and I got this weird mental fog, and it was just harder and harder and harder for me to think until I kind of reached this tipping point where it got really bad. And then, and kind of during this phase of, my mental mind state not being, or taking an absolute crap because of these pills I was on that the doctor gave me, it sucked. I was trying to date girls. Obviously that didn't work out. I almost got kicked out of the company that I'm working with. I started a fight with the CEO of my company and started sending them all these crazy, nasty text messages. I had a friend that I lost. She stopped talking to me after this period. And it was a real low point. And then it got even worse. Then these pills started inducing these suicidal thoughts into my head. And I was never suicidal before any of this. I've never had a suicidal thought ever before. The antidepressants literally put these thoughts into my head, and I started envisioning killing myself 30, 40 times a day, every single day, literally nonstop. And I remember walking around my house and I would start getting stuck in these delusions about killing myself. And then I catch myself and I was like, shut the fuck up. What are you why are you thinking about this stuff? Stop thinking about this stuff. 5 minutes later, I'd be envisioning a different way of killing myself. It was the craziest thing ever. And so I went back to my doctor during this period. I told him, man, these pills made everything worse. He never once asked me, oh, okay, you taking any other supplements? No, never once asked me that. He just stuck me on a different antidepressant. Did not help the situation at all. I talked to 3 different therapists during this time period, try to figure out what the heck's going on. None of them asked me, oh, are you taking any other supplements along with your antidepressant? I went to the hospital. I tried to check myself in for inpatient care because I really didn't want to kill myself, but I just could not stop thinking about it. And they turned me away. They wouldn't let me go in there. They said because of COVID, they're not doing any inpatient cares except for extreme situations. If I hadn't tried to kill myself already, it made it seem like I wouldn't qualify for that. And they turned me away. They also didn't ask me if I've taken any other supplements. And so this was a really, really dark time. And this was probably probably April and May of last year. And I remember I had my son with me, and I told my wife and my ex-wife, you have to take him. I don't want to accidentally kill myself in front of him. Or when I have him, I really started fearing for his safety, when I was taking him. And I told her, you have to take them permanently. Something's wrong. I don't know what the heck's wrong with me. I've gone to all these doctors. They can't help me. You have to take him permanently. And so this was a really dark time that I was literally giving up my son and said, I don't want custody of him anymore. Luckily, thank God, I was actually looking at the text messages not that long ago. A day or so after this, my ex-wife texted me, and she said to me, it's probably all those damn pills you're taking that's doing this to you. And whatever reason, that never occurred to me. Because I was in this really funky mindset, that never occurred to me that the pills that the doctor gave me and these other pills that are perfectly legal and safe and over the counter were somehow mixing together. And she sent me this text message. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And so the next day, I stopped taking all of these other supplements, just my antidepressant. The day after that, I felt so much better. All that stuff went out of my head. And then a few days after that, I said, like, it 100% was all these pills. And a few days after that, I stopped taking the antidepressant altogether. So this is relevant to the story because this is really where I found my discipline, right? This is an absolute rock bottom of my entire life, is this moment in time. In 2017, I was in the military. I was 11 years in the military. I spent 4 years working at the White House. And, I met President Obama, met President Trump, met President Biden while I was there, 2016, 2017. And I was hot shit, man. I was, on top of my game. I was sharp. I used to drive one of the vehicles in the motorcade. After that, I got out and I started my own business. And in 2020, I brought in $300,000 worth of income, which I was very proud of doing that. I've gone from, being proud of where I'm at in life and who I am to absolutely rock bottom, to being a divorced father of a disabled son that's overweight, and turning into an alcoholic, has no discipline, and is on the verge of killing himself, right? In just 6 to 12 months, complete fall to grace. My entire business was collapsing at that point. But this is really relevant to the story because it's at this point that I found my discipline. It's at this point that I started doing the Dr. Joe meditations every single day. Without me hitting this point, without me having this fall to grace and hitting absolute rock bottom, I don't know if I ever would have found the discipline to do this work every single day, like Dr. Joe says to. Dr. Joe often talks about how sometimes the worst events in our life, in retrospects, turn out to be the best event, the best thing that ever happened to us. And I'm hoping that's the case for me. I'm hoping hitting rock bottom like this, and me finding my discipline, and me having to claw my way back up from rock bottom, I'm hoping that it will turn out to be the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life, and I think that it might. Now, a few parts of the story that I kind of left out. During this whole divorce process, in passing, a friend of mine mentioned the book, Becoming Supernatural. And they just kind of mentioned it to me. I instantly bought it, started reading it. I was like, wow, this is awesome stuff. So during that process, I was trying to read this book. And then I started Googling Dr. Joe and looking him up on YouTube. So he has some guided meditations. And so I started kind of just doing them, trying them out here and there pretty inconsistently. Maybe once a week I'd find time to do it. I remember the very first time, they're like hour-long meditations. I did like 20 minutes of it, and then I had to hop out of there. So I was kind of trying to piece together things at this time. So this was probably, February, March, April, May, this time frame. And I think May is probably when I hit rock bottom. And June is when I said, okay, this is it, man. I'm going to do this stuff every single day. And in fact, when I had that mindset shift and I really started getting disciplined at it, I wasn't just doing it every single day. The first week or so, I did some of these meditations 3 times a day. I would wake up, I would do it in bed right after I wake up. Later on, I would do another meditation in the middle of the day. End of the night, I would do another meditation, right? sometimes one thing I like to do is he has this blessing of the energy center chakra meditation, and I would set it to repeat, and I would do the entire meditation, and the thing would start right back over, and then I do the entire meditation a second time. It's like a 50-minute meditation, so this is like an hour and a half of meditation. And so for the first month, I got really serious about it and started doing these things every day at least, sometimes multiple times a day. And I'd say that after the first month, almost immediately, I started noticing changes in my life and really in my mindset. You know, when you're in these really elevated levels of stress, right? When I have all this anxiety about my son, and I get stuck in these thoughts about, oh, I regret ever marrying my wife, and I hate my wife, and she's causing all this problems. You have all these negative thoughts that keep reoccurring over and over and over again, right? Like obsessively thinking about negative things like that is very common for people. Dr. Joe talks about this, and I remember listening to talk about how people get stuck in these loops and keep thinking about the same situations over again. I was like, that is exactly what I've been doing. I keep thinking about my ex-wife, and it's all her fault, and keep thinking about my son, and keep thinking about how my life would be different if I do all these things. And so I started doing his meditations, and immediately after a meditation, I would feel great, right? When you're having all these negative thoughts, you have elevated cortisol level, you have elevated adrenaline. Maybe if you're getting angry, you have elevated testosterone, you're getting really worked up and angry, and that's not a great feeling. And when you do these meditations, you're kind of wiping the slate clean. You don't have any of those feelings, any of those hormones running through your body after you complete one of these meditations. So immediately, I started feeling much better for the short term, right? You do a meditation, the next hour after a meditation, like, you feel great. I think anybody can experience that. And so I started doing his work, and I was doing it daily, so I'd have these little bouts where I feel great, but then I'd kind of snap back to reality a few hours after that, and kind of start rehearsing all these negative things and repeating all these negative things and being stressed out in my life. But I kept doing the work. And after a few months of doing this work, I remember I woke up one day and I got my coffee, went out on my deck, and I was just standing out there, and I remember thinking, like, man, I feel great. You know, I didn't even do my meditation yet. I just woke up and, like, I feel great. I feel optimistic about my future. I'm so happy to be alive. I had all these really positive emotions. And I stopped and I thought, like, you know what? Like, nothing in my life has actually changed. Nothing around me has actually changed. At this point, my business was still falling apart. I still owed the IRS $45,000, which I didn't have. I still owed my ex-wife $75,000, which I didn't have. And I had to pay my ex-wife $4,000 a month in child support and alimony. And that's unfortunately because 2020 was my best year ever in my business. I brought in $300,000. That's why I had to stop getting there $4,000 a month in child support and alimony. So I still had those stresses in my life. I still had my child that I was taking care of. I still had my ex-wife that I was dealing with. I still was overweight. I was still drinking too much at this point. But I felt great. I felt optimistic. And I remember realizing this, that nothing has changed except for my mindset. At this point, I felt, very optimistic about my future. And I think, kind of realizing this, that totally lines up with what Dr. Joe talks about. He says that you have to feel the emotions of what your future is going to be first. You have to do that first, and then the rest of your reality will kind of come into place. After that, it'll follow. That reality is a lagging indicator. You have to feel those emotions, change your mindset first, and then the situations in your life will follow behind you. And so that's about 3 months in, I had that kind of revelation. And I kept doing the work. And throughout this whole time, I finished Becoming Supernatural. I started reading. I finished You Are the Placebo. I finished Breaking the Habits of Becoming Yourself. I took his online course, The Formula. And just now, I finished his intensive online course just in the last week or so. And now I'm working on the progressive online course. So after that 3-month mark is when I also really started trying to make changes in my life, right? Having the discipline to do these meditations every single day, I feel like that discipline leaked over into other aspects of my life. And it's around this time I started cutting back on drinking. And at some point, I said, I'm just going to go cold turkey and just stop drinking altogether. Because, for the first few months, I was still drinking every single day, just about. Maybe one day a week I would have the discipline not to drink. But most part, I was drinking every day. And at some point, I just stopped drinking. And I've been about 2 months now without any alcohol at all, which is amazing because that played a huge part in my life for years, unfortunately, dealing with all this stress. At some point, I also went vegan during this whole process, which is also amazing because I've been a huge meat eater. I love steak. I love hot wings. I love all that stuff. But, from learning from Dr. Joe how impactful the hormones in our bodies, the adrenaline, the cortisol, the testosterone, the oxytocin, how much this actually impacts our thoughts and our feelings. And also seeing how the chemicals between those different supplements interacted to literally impact my thoughts. I started realizing, these farm-raised chickens and cows and everything, they're injecting them with all sorts of hormones and antibodies and steroids, and they're literally mutant, inbred, hybrid animals, and raised in terrible conditions. And I just started thinking, I wonder if that type of mutant meat impacts me as well, if that's releasing some kind of chemicals and hormones or stimulating certain hormones that can then have an impact on my thoughts. And that's really why I went vegan in this whole process. And not just vegan, but whole food, eating as raw food as I can. And again, this goes back to my discipline. When I had the discipline to do these meditations, that discipline leaked over into me working out every day. It leaked over to me giving up alcohol. It leaked over to me really cleaning up my diet as well. That has additional positive effects. And so this whole process has these accumulative effects to it, I think. It's an exponential growth, not just a linear growth. And here I am, 6 months later, I feel great. I can't tell you how great I feel. I feel optimistic. I guess the biggest thing, I feel optimistic about my future now. I'm also exploring new things. I went to an in-person yoga class today. I've never done that before in my life. I always had a lot of anxiety about going to a yoga class. What happens if I fall, or I can't do the moves, or I breathe too hard, people will be looking at me. I have a lot of anxiety about that. And I went to my very first in-person yoga class. 2 weeks from now, I signed up to do an open mic and try my hand at stand-up comedy. I've never, ever done that, ever. That used to give me a tremendous amount of anxiety thinking about being up in front of a group of people, let alone trying to perform and tell jokes to them. So honestly, I don't know if I've ever been in a better place in my life mentally. I don't think I've ever had less anxiety than I do right now. I don't know if I've ever had as much confidence in myself. I don't know if I've ever been as optimistic in my future as I am right now in my life, which is pretty amazing. And it's amazing because of where I was 6 months before. Going from the absolute lowest point in my life to having, the most mental clarity that I've ever had in my life. That's a pretty big transformation, I think. And I also say, I used to have really bad back pain. That was another aspect of the story I kind of left out. I actually got medical discharge out of the military because I had really bad back pain and I could not keep up with the work or the workouts in the military. So 2017, I got a discharge. Unfortunately, that also really contributed to my drinking habits because I would have a really bad back pain that day. I would go and drink alcohol because alcohol is a muscle relaxant and it absolutely would help. The alcohol absolutely helped my back pain. Somewhere in this whole process over the last 6 months, I just realized man, I have not had back pain in a long time. And it's almost completely gone. I can't even remember the last time I've had back pain. Like I said, I was doing yoga today. I've been lifting a lot of weights. And I would be remiss to not make that connection that maybe the elevated cortisol and the elevated adrenaline and all these other negative hormones associated with negative emotions, maybe those were contributing to my back pain. Maybe those contributed to inflammation. And maybe entering into this state of mind of meditation where I don't have those states, maybe that's given my body a moment to catch up and breathe and relax and actually heal myself. I think that is entirely possible, that your body is absolutely capable of healing itself. It does it all the time. And you hurt yourself, your body immediately starts healing yourself. And maybe when you're in these negative states of emotions and thinking, that is not the optimal situation for your body to heal yourself. If you were to design what is the optimal situation for your body to heal yourself, it would be going deep into one of these meditations. And it's unbelievable, but I just don't have back pain anymore. I feel stronger than I have in a long time. And I really think that physiologically, these meditations have had a real impact on my body as well as my mind. Now, Dr. Joe talks about really, I think, two different benefits in his teachings. One aspect of it is kind of what I'm talking about, where you can have a physiological effect on your body. You can rewire the neural connections in your brain and establish new habits, prune old habits. You can regulate the hormones that are flowing through your body. All of that, I am 100% on board with. I am 100% confident in that. I will argue anybody with any of that, because our thoughts, every thought literally has a sequence of hormones that it releases in your body. And by policing your thoughts and catching them and just being aware of what thoughts are in your mind at any time, you absolutely can regulate your thoughts, which are going to regulate the hormones running through your body. And I've absolutely learned how to do that from Dr. Joe and by doing this work, doing his meditation. Now, he has another aspect to this, and this is a little bit more metaphysical, a little bit more new age, a little bit more spiritual, about manifesting a new destiny and attracting things to you. And this aspect of it, I'm very open to it. I would say this aspect to it, though, there's not as much science about this as what I just previously mentioned. There's a tremendous amount of science and data and research about establishing neural connections, pruning old neural connections, establishing habits, pruning old habits, regulating the hormones that flow through your body, and how our thoughts trigger our adrenal glands or our gonads or our pituitary gland to release specific hormones. There's a tremendous amount of research about that. Attracting, getting signs from the universe and everything. This side of it is a little bit more fringe science. There's not as much Western data and research backing up this. I will say that I have had a lot of life circumstances greatly improve in the last 6 months. The money I owed to the IRS, I paid that off. I had some income coming in. I had some pretty nice income coming in December. I actually made $40,000 in December. I owed the IRS $45,000. I was able to mostly pay that off. I owed my ex-wife $75,000. She actually came up to me and was like, you know what? How about instead of you giving me the cash sum, how about if we just spread that out over the next couple of years and you just continue to pay me child support and alimony for a couple additional years? Like, she came up with that solution and proposed it to me, which is great. Now I don't have that financial stress as well. And I've been looking for signs from the universe, right? I've been looking for these things because he talks a lot about them. And there's a couple of positive things that have kind of come into my life. In March, I got invited to this big trip to go snowboard in Colorado, a big group of people. Financially, my old business is kind of falling apart, but I've had a couple of new business opportunities that have really kind of come about that I was pretty fortunate to have come about, and it's very possible that these are the kind of things that he's talking about. I'm pretty analytical, and maybe I'm not as in tune and sensitive to these signs from the universe, and that kind of side of the things I can't really attest to pro or con, right? I can't really say whether or not I've really manifested a new destiny or anything. I guess I kind of have, in the way that I've been able to transform my mind and I have a new mindset now. I haven't seen any really serendipitous or really amazing coincidences kind of come into my life, in my opinion, yet. But I'm still very, very open to that. And so right now I'm taking his progressive course, and I'm learning a lot. I'm very excited about it. I took his intensive course, and I love that course. I highly recommend that. In that course, he kind of teaches you a lot about what we've been talking about, how our brain, how our thoughts establish new neural connections, and how you can prune old neural connections. And he has you list down all the emotions, that negative emotions that you feel that you don't want to feel anymore, the thoughts that lead to those emotions. And then he has you write down the emotions that you want to feel and the thoughts that you want to think. And he has you go deep into this meditation. You're like 20 minutes into this meditation. And he claims that this is where you're experiencing alpha brain waves, which is where your body is mostly asleep, but your mind is still awake. And this is how you can influence your subconscious. And you go into this state, he has you think about the thoughts that you no longer want to think about, and then you tell yourself, I am no longer thinking about this. And in the meditation, he goes on to say, and anytime these thoughts emerge, what are you going to say? You're going to say, change, 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 right? And so the idea is anytime you have these thoughts, you say to yourself, change, and it's supposed to stop these thoughts. And then he kind of goes over what thoughts is it that you want to implant in your head. And I absolutely love this. I can't tell you how effective that has been for me. When I have an urge to eat some bad food right now, I hear Dr. Joe's voice in my head saying, change. And I see CHANGE in big, bold letters in my head. And it puts a stop to these thoughts. It's almost like you're shushing somebody, right? I start having these thoughts like, man, I really want that pizza. And I say, change. It's almost like you're going, shh, shh. And it literally stops that sequence of thoughts. It just stops it right in its tracks. And so I'm very optimistic about continuing to do this work moving forward. Now that I've taken that class, I'm in his progressive class right now. After that, then I want to go to one of his advanced retreats where you do these meditations in a group sequences. And in these sequence, or in a group setting, he claims that during your advanced meditations, he'll teach you how to influence matter in a non-local state, something along that lines, and how to heal other people. And this is something that's really motivating for me. With my son, he also offers a free service where you can do a Zoom call with some of his advanced meditators, and they'll try to influence your child or influence you to heal yourself. I did one of these sessions. I actually have a whole video about it I'll link to at the end of this one. But I want to learn how to do that. Everything Dr. Joe has ever said about psychologically, about how your thoughts influence your body and the hormones and neural connections, all of that is true. And his meditations absolutely can teach you how to reprogram your mind. I absolutely believe that. And so when he says this other stuff about how using your thoughts and by entering this meditative states, you can influence somebody else's body for the better, I'm open to that. I really want to believe that, and I really want to keep going down this rabbit hole and learn how I can help my son by doing these meditations as well. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. This is kind of my 6-month update. I am incredibly optimistic about the future. I feel great. I feel happy all the time. All those negative thoughts and negative emotions, I rarely ever feel them anymore. And as soon as I catch them and I realize that I'm having them, I got caught up in one of these ones, I'm much quicker to shush it, and put a stop to that line of thinking altogether. And, I'm really optimistic about, where I'm going to get in another 6 months after doing this work. So I am absolutely a believer in Dr. Joe. I've drank his Kool-Aid. I'm going to continue to do this work. I've done my hour-long meditation for today. He says that he does 2 hours of meditation a day. So, maybe my hour-long meditations are rookie numbers. Maybe I got to up those numbers some more. But I am incredibly optimistic about, where I'm going in life and this line of work. And I absolutely intend to continue doing Dr. Joe's meditations. Now, if you guys do want to see my full review, a full experience of what it was like signing up for one of his coherence healing meditations with my son and kind of what that experience was like, I have an entire video right here that I made kind of going over what that was like and what those results were from that coherence healing meditation. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you over in the next video.